Manifestos will get the Liberal Democrats offered tomorrow, the Tories on Tuesday, and Labour's policies come on Thursday.
Do they matter? Do they change the electoral landscape? We're joined by two people who have gone to the trouble of writing them.
Yeah, Rachel Wolfe is a founding partner at Public First and co-authored the Conservative Party's 2019 manifesto, and Marc Stears is director of the University College London Policy Lab and was co-author of the 2015 Labour election manifesto and joins us in the studio. Good morning, both.
Good morning.
Now, I feel like we should start with that question, which I hope the answer to which isn't no, or it might render this feature slightly pointless. But Rachel, let's start with you. Do manifestos matter at all?
Yes, I think they matter in three ways. First, as we've seen in the past, they can help you lose an election if you put the wrong things into them. Second, which is what I suspect people will be hoping right now, they hammer home the messages you're trying to land in an election. They give substance to them and help carry you over the line. And third, which is probably what we all wish they were for entirely, is they create a mandate to hopefully move the country in a better direction. There are all sorts of conventions about how the civil service, but also the House of Lords, look at manifestos. And the idea is they make it easier for you then to pass the legislation that you need to for the country.
Yeah, we'll come on to talk about how they're actually used in Parliament in a little bit. But Mark, I mean, obviously, Rachel's saying that they do matter, and there are lots of reasons why they may well matter to the party. But do you think many people out there actually read them cover to cover?
I think very few people read them now, sadly. I mean, when I was a kid, you could buy them at W.H. Smith's and, people would...
No, you couldn't.
You could, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Did you buy them, Adam?
I wasn't that much of a nerd. William Hague bought them when he was...
I think I browsed them on the shelves,
Cheated, yeah, that's fair enough.
But I think they are meant to tell a story. I think that's I think a good manifesto, like the 1945 Labour one or the 1979 Conservative one, are more than just lists of policies. They are a kind of central version of the argument that the parties put into the country. And when they're written well, and when they sort of find an audience, it's not that because people have read page 55, paragraph 6. It's rather they've got the sort of general argument that they're putting across.
I wonder if in the age of social media, parties need to do that less, though, because they are literally doing that all the time in video form. I mean, Rachel, talking about how they get written, how much of this is driven by the actual leader of the party who sits down and says, this is what I think, and how much is it the shadow cabinet or the cabinet, or is it just someone entirely different altogether?
Well, I think it varies election to election. The first thing I think to bear in mind, picking up what Mark said, is that the manifesto isn't most of the manifesto process. By the time the manifesto is published, most of the policies in it have already been announced. So the manifesto is a grid that drives an election campaign and hopefully a story, as Mark said. In our election, 2019, it was a very collaborative process. We deliberately involved quite a lot of the cabinet and lots of other people, as well as the Prime Minister. Other manifestos for the Conservative Party that has no formal process are kept very tight. If you're in the Labour Party, though, you actually have rules you have to follow. So the answer is quite different.
So, Mark, let's talk about those rules, because we've heard this week Labour has tied its manifesto up. But without getting into the intricacies of a Clause 5 meeting, which I'm sure would put people to sleep, including John Green, who says it's all pointless anyway, why are you talking about manifestos? Labour does have quite a strict policy, and it does need approval. It didn't get the approval of all unions this week, did it?
Well, I mean, again, the formal processes and the real processes are always a little bit different, So, as you say, no one wants to go into the intricacies of national policy forums and Clause 5 meetings. But with Labour, you do have to bring, your sort of primary stakeholders along for the general ride, and then there can be sort of really difficult last-minute negotiations about particular issues. I think what we've seen this time round, though, is that Keir Starmer is so far ahead in the polls, and his position in the party is so strong that it doesn't really matter to him that one of the major unions seems a little bit grumpy about, some of the details. And, I thought Shabana Mahmood has been out on a media round this morning, sort of grinning from ear to ear that it's all fine, really. It doesn't, we're not going to have big media banner headlines about unions getting cross, and that just shows how strong the Labour position is at the moment.
But perhaps he's missing an opportunity because, as Rachel was saying, you put in a manifesto things that is generally accepted, you will be allowed to pass if you get a majority. And we're told, actually, that this manifesto, don't expect any surprises. You've heard it all before. perhaps he should be putting in some more radical things if he's going to win so comfortably.
I think there's probably something really important going on here, though. I think that the government that Starmer wants to lead for 5 years is a fairly incremental, cautious government. So he's not just sort of writing a small manifesto in order to have a small target in order to win a big majority. He's actually displaying the kind of prime minister that he wants to be, which is one step at a time. Tackle big problems with serious intent. Don't promise the earth. I think he is, in that sense, showing the country what they're likely to get from their next prime minister for the next term in Parliament.
Which is a story in itself, isn't it? Rachel, they're not legally binding, these documents, and parties have in the past ditched fairly, integral pledges that they've made in the manifestos. That did happen in 2019 too, on tax, which we've been talking about a lot this morning. Does that lessen the impact of them when voters read them and think, OK, well, I hear you, but it might not actually happen?
Massively. I think you hear one very strong thing in this election, which is total lack of enthusiasm from voters because they don't think that politicians keep their promises. And partly because of the incrementalism, but also because of that legacy, people are not enthusiastically flocking to Labour. They think that nothing much is going to change and the promises will be made and then dropped. So I do think that's a problem, and it's a problem for politics. I'm not sure you can make manifestos legally binding, though, because as you saw with COVID and Ukraine, the world transforms on you and you can't always do exactly what you thought you were going to be able to do 5 years earlier. It would be nice if you did a bit more of what you said you were going to do 5 years earlier and maintain a bit more public confidence.
Yeah, and it might give you more trust from voters if parties could be relied on. Rachel mentioned that they impact the workings of Parliament. Just explain to people how they do that.
I think that's when I first went into politics, I was really struck by just how, even though, as you say, they're not legally binding documents, people are quite legalistic in the way in which they read them, which is that they think that the government has a mandate from the country in order to deliver the promises that are made in the manifesto. And if you're a civil servant or a journalist or a backbench politician, you therefore take the sort of black letters in that manifesto much more seriously than you would do most things. And again, as you just rightly said, doesn't mean that they are binding, and sometimes people will ignore them or always intend to ignore them, but they do have a kind of serious status, which I think is probably much in excess of what most voters kind of currently realise.
Rachel, Marc just told us what he thinks Keir Starmer's Labour Party are going to try and do with their manifesto. The Conservatives are where they are in the opinion polls. What do you think they should try and do with their manifesto?
Well, it's sort of amusing, isn't it, that Labour's platform is change, and they are going to have an extremely incremental manifesto, which is as boring as they can make it. And the Conservatives' platform is, stick with us, we offer stability. And I suspect they're going to try and throw much more dramatic policies into the manifesto because they're trying to come from behind. It seems, as you've discussed this morning, that tax will be the dividing line that they try and draw with tax cuts. And my guess is that they will also try and push hard on some of the traditional areas that the Conservatives have been strong in the past, crime, welfare. I think it's slightly topsy-turvy the way the parties are approaching these compared to their platform.
And Marc, final word from you. Do you expect any surprises at all in Labour's manifesto?
I doubt there'll be surprises. There'll probably be a few more policies that that haven't been fully announced yet. But I think Keir Starmer has shown the country what kind of PM he wants to be, and that's what the manifesto will show.
What was the title of your manifesto?
Good grief.
Can you remember?
No, I can't remember. It was something like Britain Deserves Better, but that's what they're always called.
I know, Rachel. What's the title of your manifesto?
Get Brexit done. Unleash Britain's potential.
It's quite long. I do remember that one, though. Marc,
get Brexit done.
Marc points off for not remembering your manifesto title. I'm sure you've got a copy at home. Rachel Wolfe, Marc Stears, you could sign them. You know what? You could sneak them into WH Smith and leave them on the shelf and see if anyone takes them to the counter. Rachel, Marc, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.